got our service tonight, which is fantastic. We got some new lights, praise God. I have been looking forward to this for forever. So we've got these new floor lights. We've got these new side panel lights over here and here. Got one in the back now. So it looks pretty sick. Love it, love it, love it. Waiting for all the kids to get in here. This is old Betsy Rue. That's actually not her name, but I just named her.
I can run faster without heavy like shoes.
All right, how about we race with me on my knees and you running? Ready? Go.
To get us a little bit hyped up about what we're talking about today, which is being different from the world. So that's our main point for today, is we're called to be different. That's the first blank on your outline. And then the second one is, if you feel like a fish out of water, you're doing it right. So before we read our main passage, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context about it, because this is actually Jesus talking. He's praying for his future disciples, which is us. And so, does anybody want to read it for us?
They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified.
Awesome. So the word that really sticks out to me in this passage is sanctified. And does anybody know what sanctification is? I'm going to give you like a simple definition of it. Yeah?
Set apart?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like to set apart as sacred or to make holy. So does anybody how does that like apply to us as Christians? How does us being set apart kind of apply to us? Any ideas? Yeah.
Keeping your temple clean.
What was that?
Keeping your temple clean.
Yeah, so like kind of making sure that your heart is right before God.
Correct.
Kind of? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I have a couple of different answers for why we are sanctified. First one is we're called to be different from the world because we are. Basically, once we accepted Jesus into our hearts, we don't belong to the world anymore. Our citizenship is now in heaven, which means that is where we belong. And like 1 Thessalonians 5:5 says, does anybody want to read that? Anybody at all? Zane wants to read it. Okay.
You are all children of the light and children of the day. You do not belong to the night or the darkness.
Nice job. Yeah, so like I was just saying, we don't belong to the world anymore. We don't belong to the darkness because we have been called into the light. So, There's something wrong with this picture. This guy is not where he belongs. Anybody? I'm using this to illustrate because when he is where he does belong. Does anybody know why the zebra is striped? Daniel?
To blend into everything, and then if a predator is attacking, it can zigzag and make the lion or whatever dizzy.
Exactly. That's exactly right. When he is where he belongs, he's designed to blend into his background. And that's kind of how we are before we accept Jesus. When we still belong with the world, we blend in very naturally. But then once we've been called into God's kingdom, and once we accept him into our hearts, then we start belonging in heaven. And yet we remain on earth. And that's my theory, is that so that we can stick out. And that's our other point of why we are sanctified. We're called to be different from the world in order to save the world. Like it says in our main passage, Jesus says, "As you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. For them I sanctify myself, that they too may be truly sanctified." So basically, just like Jesus was sent into the world, he has sent us into the world. Jesus was sent into the world partially so that he could show people who God was to people who didn't know who he was. He was here to become an image of God, pretty much. The Colossians 1:15 says that he was the image of the invisible God. And now that he's back in heaven, we get to do the same thing. We get to represent Jesus to those who don't know who he is. And just like Jesus, we sanctify ourselves so that the world might see and be called into the kingdom as well. So the main goal is to win as many as possible. And this hashtag #Tuamath I borrowed from BK. Basically, if our lives are no different than the people who are watching us for who Jesus is, then what is there to draw them to the faith? If they're no different than we are, if we're no different than they are, then why should they commit to such a radical change of their lives if there's no evidence that it's going to be any better than their own? And so part of our job is to provide that evidence, which is why we are called to be different. So the next question is how? How do we change? Does anybody have any ideas? Josiah?
Getting introduced to new things.
Quite. What about?
Plastic surgery.
Well, that would definitely work to change our outside, but how do we change the inside? What about you, John?
Being completely honest.
Yeah. How about you, Abby?
Being kind, even if people are testing or pushing our buttons or something.
Mm-hmm. So basically, my theory is that we personally cannot change ourselves to be different from the world. We have to let God change us instead. Does anybody know who this guy is? Bumblebee. Yes. That's Bumblebee. Anybody know what Bumblebee is? Yes, he is. I heard it. He's a transformer.
Well, I was going to say Camaro.
So, does anybody read Romans 12:2? How about you, Daniel?
Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah. So, this is basically saying, don't choose to not blend in with the world. Instead, let yourself be transformed by God, because God is the one who can renew our mind. Does anybody know what transform means? Anybody who hasn't answered yet? Olivia? Yeah, it means literally to change form, which is why Bumblebee is called a transformer, because he literally changes form from a car into this big warrior guy. And I think a main point about this is it does not say transform yourself. It says let yourself be transformed, which means you aren't the one doing the work. You're letting God change you. There is a choice in there. We're supposed to not conform to the pattern of this world. So basically, we are the ones who get to choose to set ourselves apart from the world and chase God instead. So basically, to avoid changing yourself to be like the world is by letting God change you. I'm just going to make sure I hit everything I wanted to. This is going way faster than sure. Yeah, so when you stop chasing the world and you chase God instead, then He can change you. Basically, if you want to get warmer, you draw closer to the fire. Because when we draw closer to God, He naturally changes us to be more like Him. And that's how we become fish out of water. I like this picture. Is there any questions? Yeah, Daniel?
It's not quite a question, but is it similar to like Eustace in Narnia when he
Exactly.
turns into a dragon and then his scales come off?
Yeah, so exactly. Eustace was not able to change himself from a dragon back into a boy. Aslan had to change him. So that was perfect example. So who can tell me our big idea? Yeah, Benjamin?
We are called to be different.
Exactly. And does anybody know, can anybody tell me what sanctification is? Zane.
To set apart as sacred or make holy.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And why are we set apart?
You read your writing.
Josiah?
To save the world?
Yes, that's one of them. And Evie? Because we are. Yes. We're supposed to be different from the world because we are, and to save the world. And how do we change? Johanna?
By letting God transform us.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've got a couple of walking points, and I'm kind of glad we have a little extra time because some of these go a little bit deeper and require a little bit more thought. So if you guys want to split into groups, then we can be on our way.
We're going to be schools of fishies.
Give her a hand.